Mic test. Hey, everybody. Hey. You guys look like the First Presbyterian Church. I was raised in church, so I understand we just came back from lunch, and some of y'all are struggling. Some of y'all are doing the head dance. So, yeah, there's coffee in the back. If you want to, while the bowl's setting up, why don't you just stand and stretch real quick?
Yeah, let's get standing, get some walk around.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't want y'all falling asleep on me. We have to blame it on somebody else.
Can I flashback to anybody? Yeah, just to take
Well, I don't know what my email has, but I know what my Facebook but I know. I mean, but I can't
Okay, y'all hurry back. Don't try to sneak out.
Hey, Gene, how are you?
Hi, Jean.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Okay, guys, 60 seconds because I don't want to take up a lot of time. Y'all was trying to get it over on me. So we've stretched, we've endured. I want to take this time though, before I get into mine, I want to give many kudos to all of you, Volusia County, Orange County, Brevard County for making this day happen. Everyone has worked tirelessly, and I think that we all can be very proud of the work that's done, and that we're still not done yet. So, but everything I'm grateful for all that you guys have done. So, I want to do what we do in the Black church. Make sure y'all awake. It's real quick.
We're gonna sing?
No, because I can't sing really well. But I want you to look to your right, to your left. Decide who your neighbor's going to be. And I want you to tap your neighbor on the right and the left and tell them reparations now.
Right.
Reparations now.
Reparations matter?
Reparations now.
Now, so y'all did that pretty good. Y'all did that pretty good. So, someone said, what did she say? Reparations now. So I'm going to try to be brief so that we can maybe have a little discussion. And I know time has been well spent, so this is a discussion that's not going to stop anytime soon. And I want to, if someone can someone walk up here really fast and catch, and just, I can't give these to you yet, but if we just kind of make sure that everyone kind of sees, and you kind of thumb through it. Our HR 40 is like a little booklet. So my presentation is going to be on reparations. And you can go to the next slide already. And I do work with other organizations around reparations. And we want to have we kind of hopefully want to get rid of some misnomers about reparations, that it's just about a check, or some people have no idea. We hear that, so we kind of want to give some context to what it is and what it isn't as quickly as I can. To give context, basically reparations is about 400 years of terror, crimes against our humanity, meaning descendants of slavery and African slaves. We want to talk about the consequences, and basically we want to talk about full repair. What reparations is a remedy, full repair, not just as partial, because just to get a check, that's insulting within itself, and it kind of is a play or ploy on our intelligence, because if we just said we got a check for $1,500 every black person, well then we're like, okay, we're done, we paid our reparations. No, baby, we're talking about full repair. So we want to eradicate some of those misnomers that are out there. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. And this discussion about reparations, it's a revolutionary, which means we're not asking for permission to ask for it, but this is a revolutionary. Jeff's kind of hit on some of that in his presentation, and there's been discussion about it throughout the day. But this is a revolutionary discussion, a revolutionary moment in our time that we're talking about it. Next slide. And I can't see. So presidential candidates, all over, there's a lot of conversation from presidential candidates about reparations this time out. And so I'm going to kind of quickly hit on what some things are being said. But it makes you wonder whether it's just a ploy not to just get the black vote. So Elizabeth Warren, she kind of, she talked about reparations from a standpoint because she said she had some native blood. I don't know, it's not my business. I don't know whether she did 23andMe or what DNA component she used, but that's not my business, okay? So Cory Booker's idea about reparations, well, he'll just have baby bonds. I'm not sure he's talking about baby boomers or babies coming, I don't know, but that was his idea about reparations, baby bonds. And then, so Bernie Sanders, I know I'm gonna hurt some people's feelings because some of y'all just so in love with Bernie Sanders. But he sometimes said he don't know what it is. Or he kind of dances around the question about reparations. And Kamala Harris, I don't know what she's saying. I'm not sure where she is on that, and that's okay. And so the only thing that I will say now is that as far as the Green Party, it's in our platform. As someone pointed out, Rose or someone, it's in our platform. So every candidate should be talking about it, but hopefully from an authentic standpoint. So we know that the Dems and the Republicans, but I haven't heard any Republicans talk about reparations, but we know that kind of tickles the ears of the black vote. And the black vote is very key in any and every vote. And I do have slides about that, but I don't want to talk about that this time around. So we're trying to see whether this is just lip service or we want to convey some things. And we also want to give notice to hashtag ADOS. Anybody heard about that? There's a movement, hashtag ADOS, African Descendants of Slavery. They're out there. But don't get caught up in the whole myth of just because folks are talking about it, that it's coming from a left or a correct perspective. There are some white wing folks that are being tooled to talk about it, to maybe suppress or to produce a myopic view. So ADOS, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but I am a little critical because it's very myopic in what they talk about, because they do talk about mostly as checks. And so, but what they've done is they've been able to be very, very good through social media. They're very good at it. So what we're trying, when I say we're talking about in Cobra, Black is Back Coalition, and the other one has a long acronym I'll give you at the end. But they're trying to be more tech savvy, more social media savvy as well. But ADOS is key. They get into arguments with people and all of that. So, so they kind of fill that void, but what they've done is kind of minimize the goals of what reparations is supposed to be about and what the intent is. So I'm here to tell you guys, hopefully, to not get caught up in the whole ADOS movement as such. And so, and we also can't. There are some groups that would like to take credit for the conversation and the dialogue that we now hear about reparations. And I can't say or just give one group that type of prestige. I'd like to think that collectively, that maybe now we're at a time that where people are ready to listen and hear about this conversation. So that's what I like to think. So yeah, next slide. Next slide, because I don't have time to go into that. Next. Next. Those are just numbers that I've had about. Yeah. So, and I can't. I'm gonna have to move up here because I can't see.
You can take the flag off.
Okay.
Off the head.
Okay. Okay. So these numbers, so 400 years of crimes against our humanity. This is an international, this is just beyond disgrace. So when we talk about reparations, we're not just talking about a check of some sort, but we're talking about being rectified for 400 years of crimes against humanity. The dates there, I would probably go back even further, but I don't want to get into that right now either. But 256 years of enslavement, 100 years of apartheid, 54 years of neocolonialism, police terrorism, housing theft, ethnic cleansing, even artistic, when I talk about artistic, I mean like musical, stealing our music, stealing the rights to that. I mean, it's just a whole array. And if you get a chance to look at those booklets, we even name some more things. And what we do with that HR 40 booklet that you have, we're always updating because we're constantly talking to people about how they've been impacted as descendants. So there's even more of a list in that. And there's a quote, I'm going to paraphrase the quote by Frederick Douglass, slavery of what it was and the imperialism that this country has done to Africans, to blacks, to people of color. He said it was behavior that would disgrace a nation of savages. And so what he was saying is that if those who are savage-like, the things, the crimes and the sins that they've committed against mankind or people, that what this nation has done would disgrace them. So crimes against humanity, you also can look up World Conference Against Racism. There's a lot of good information about that. And so this 20% survival rate, that's based on when the transatlantic slave trade. What we're saying is that 20% survival rate. And myself, we are survivors, or we are the descendants of those survivors. So we're saying 80%. And I don't really like numbers all the time because we can always argue those or debate those. But we're talking about 80% of life, of human life, was lost during the slave trade. We're talking about life lost on the ship, in the dungeons. How many of you have been to any of you guys ever been to Africa or to the continent before? Well, I've been to Ghana twice, Nigeria once, and when I stepped on the land of Cape Coast, I visited the slave castle there. And those rooms weren't even as large as probably the closets here. And the dungeons weren't. And so we're talking about men. There were dungeons for men, dungeons for women. And imagine a woman, and men, they were left there before they got put on the boat. So they ate, they urinated, they defecated. Women had their cycles all in one place. They gave birth, they lost their babies. So we're talking about this disgusting, even before they made it to the ships. This is what our ancestors were, what they encountered. And so some on the ship, some jumped ship because they'd rather face death than to come to the New World. So then when they got here, so numbers back and forth, I don't know, but we're saying 20% survival rate. And I'm going to try to read this real quick. According to a UNESCO conference summary report, African losses during the 4 centuries of the Atlantic slave trade must be put at some 210 million human beings. This estimate takes into account of those who arrived in the Americas as well as those who perished during the raids in the dungeons and on the ships. Scholars speak of a 1-to-4 ratio, that is, for every African who reached American shores. 4 more died in the process of enslavement on the African continent or in the ships. As hard as they are, these numbers do not yet take account of those who were born into slavery in the Americas nor their descendants. Okay, next slide. So there was a lot of life loss. So all consequences. We're talking about reparations in the sense that we need consequences for every sin that was done against African slaveries. Crimes against humanity, we demand repair, and there's no statute of limitations. You know, you hear people say, well, that was then, let's not talk about it, and I won't say what came to my mind, but no, we need to talk about it. We need to acknowledge it, we need to rectify it, and, you know, there are some crimes that are committed. Name a crime that has a statute of limitation. Okay, yeah, burglary, theft. And I think sometimes you have to report it within, 6 to 7 years, depending on what the crime is. 7 years. So what's already in precedence is this 400 years, there is still debts to be paid. The statute of limitation is not over. It's not done. It hasn't been paid. There is precedence for it. The Charzol factory case of 1928, you can look that up, Google it, and it talks about these reparations. And I think that was Poland and Germany. I can't think right now, but I think it's Poland and Germany. And so it's set forth that it's reparations. The Permanent Court of International Justice laid out that the general and foundational rule for reparations in the Charzol factory case of 1928. In that ruling, which is still controlling law, the court held that reparations must, as far as possible, wipe out all consequences of the illegal act and reestablish the situation which would, in all probability, have existed if that act had not been committed. So we're talking about reparations also is making humanity whole again. Does that make sense so far? Putting it back to its proper place in perspective. Next slide. The extent of all consequences was fleshed out as full reparation in the International Law Commission draft articles on responsibility of states for International Wrongful Act, Article 31. You can look that up. So it's drafted in these articles. You can Google that. Draft articles on responsibility of states. So we won't get out of it because we're nice people or because this is a new time. This is something that is still a debt owed. Any comments so far? Okay. So full repair. Here are 5 components that I got to quickly go through. 5 components and or outcomes of this reparations or full repair. And some of that is in the booklet that I have. But cessation and guarantees of repetition, which means stop. It's got to stop. Point blank. Restitution, we'll take your checks, but we need more. We need to be made whole again. Compensation, satisfaction, and rehabilitation. And I think my next slides will kind of go into that. So the statute under obligation to cease the act if it is continuing, and B, offer appropriate assurances and guarantees of non-repetition. Cessation and guarantees of non-repetition. What am I talking about? For one, it's not up here, but we need to, revisit the 13th Amendment. And I think I'm going to talk about that more on the Green New Deal. But no one wants to tackle that. The language, the little hidden black codes that we don't want to talk about. The 13th Amendment, that was a black code that was used to, I hope I'm not getting this, search and destroy modern black codes, but that's a big black code. Anyone know what the 13th Amendment says? And you can kind of like paraphrase, you don't have to like know the whole Constitution, but Joe.
It just was about freeing right, not to work for free, for involuntary.
Oh, okay. I think LeBeau.
The 13th Amendment ends involuntary servitude and slavery in all cases except for as a punishment for a crime.
Okay, so it's that language. That's how, mass incarceration, school to prison pipeline. We could go on and on if time allowed that. But those the little Jim Crow, the black codes, and we need to search those, because even sometimes on the books, in our local governments, there's little things there that we see but we don't see. Over policing issues, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, to me, that's just a big black code, because it's steeped into irregular, it's steeped into unlawful layers of bad policies. And until I'm looking for candidates, whether it's presidential, congressional, governors, that will speak to that and have no problem. No one wants to touch it because it's big. But those are codes that are still keeping us enslaved. Free all political prisoners. That's a part of reparations, because most of our political prisoners are there because they were fighting against crimes against humanity, their humanity at large. And guess what? International law says that we have a right to do that, to do so. And so until we free all political prisoners, we're not free. Dismantle criminal injustice system. Now, and I don't want to make this an issue of semantics, but that's why I don't really sign on to when folks talk about let's reform the prison system. Hell no, let's shut it down. Let's dismantle it. Because, when we reform things, we're just kind of like pasting it and putting it here and there. When I was running for office, I knew I was going to lose, because it's hard for me to conform to the language of certain things. No, I don't want a reformation. We need a revolution. And it's a lot of things, it's psychological to think about, because it seems so like overwhelming. It seems like too far-fetched. But that's what freedom is. Freedom is beyond our wildest dreams in some cases. So dismantling the criminal injustice system, searching and destroying modern black codes. So there's some work that we should be doing around the 13th Amendment, I believe, as the Green Party. I believe we should be front and center on that. Black community control of the police. That's really the only way that we're going to overturn policing issues in our neighborhoods. I'm gonna throw us all under the bus. Here in Florida, when we wanted to bring that to the forefront, some of y'all had issues with it because it said black. I love y'all, but I'm just gonna talk about you. You have an issue with that because you wanted it to say community. But when they whooping up on the black man's ass, they're being very intentional and very strategic about what they do. So I'm calling for black community control of the police. That's part of how we dismantle this system. And I don't have it here, but we kind of get into language that kind of suppresses us or oppresses us. I do not want to be called a woman of color or a minority woman or an other, because I'll accept Black or African American, because that kind of puts us all into one bag, and then we're still left out of the freedom that we need, and it's kind of a microaggression. I want to be recognized for everything, every intersection that makes me up, and so cease and desist from all behaviors, and guarantee that it stops. We need to demand a stop on over-policing. We need to demand a stop or cessation of the military and police occupying our neighborhoods, just point blank. Okay, next. Reestablish the situation which existed before the wrongful act was committed. And one way to make this whole is economic development initiatives, sorry, that's misspelled, business development initiatives, education and skill enhancement initiatives, housing initiatives. And let me say that, many of you know that I just got my tour guide license in St. Augustine. And most of St. Augustine was built by Africans, if not all. They use our labor for it. Even, Henry Flagler gets all the credit for him, and he was rich. But we did his dirty work, his shit, okay, for little or no pay. So we had race, class, gender issues, all that. And I'm bringing it up to say that America was built on the labor and the backs of Black people. We were skilled. Whether it was utilities, carpentry, masonry, we could just go on and on. But now we're in a system, because of all these disadvantages, we've been de-skilled. And so there's a suffrage. We're suffering from that. So we need those initiatives to be brought back. I have a hard time saying this. Repatriation initiatives. That means if we want or we choose to go back to, maybe not back, but to live on the continent or other places. And I know Trump would love that, to send some of us back. But actually Ghana has a program called Return 2019. And they're offering dual citizenship. I haven't looked all the way into it, but I wouldn't mind having dual citizenship, because the thing about reparations is, one thing that ADOS doesn't talk about, and what we should be talking more about, is an international concept, that it just doesn't stop here in the U.S., but as a whole. And that's a big, large conversation. But because Africa was depopulated, it's still being colonized and just, there's a lot of work to wrap your head around. Full employment initiatives, cultural enrichment initiatives, land acquisition, mass communication ownership initiatives. The media, we've talked about that, not just at a reparations level, but also as Green Party, because we know that we're often, we just don't have access, such as the Dems and Republicans. So next slide. Okay, for any compensation, again, I'll take a check, okay, but it's not the end all be all. But for any financially accessible damage suffered, proper compensation is such that it is appropriate and proportional to the gravity of the violation and circumstances. So the problem is that, sometimes Marion Williamson, I appreciate her wanting to bring reparations to a national conversation, but who in the hell told her that she had some good numbers, and that it was that it was the right figure or the right amount? It's hard to do, so maybe you just shouldn't do it, because it's more to it than that. But we will take direct cash awards, eliminating tuition debt, full tuition grants, business grants, microenterprise manufacturing, repatriation settlements, housing grants. We have horrible, Disneyland or Orlando, where Mickey Mouse lives, we have housing emergencies right now as I'm talking. I have friends who live on couches because it's just horrible. It's horrible. Okay, next slide. Okay, satisfaction. As a means for reparations for moral damage, such as emotional injury, mental suffering, and injury to reputation, return of dignity. I think I talked about it earlier. We're just talking about being made whole. How to make this satisfactory? A complete apology. I think everyone has gotten an apology except for Africans. And here in Florida, there's so many cases, the Rosewood Massacre, the Dozier boys, the reform school where they did horrid acts against these young boys. And there's many communities that were burned down right here in Florida, and they just now getting some apologies. And most of them, they're dead and gone. So we're slow to make a move on that. Monuments and markers, I think we talked about that earlier. Museums, curriculum overhauled and control. We should not have to hear about Christopher Columbus, finding America, and all that bullshit. We just shouldn't. So there should be a complete overhaul and rectified, and because most of us, we begin the history of African Americans in slavery. But before then, what was life like before then? We had empires, dynasties. There's a lot more to it than just that. Okay, next. Consists of physical, mental, emotional, and spirit healing, menticide, and trauma centers. Imagine 400 years, maybe more, of post-traumatic slave disorder. You can look that up. Imagine that many years of going through trauma and not having emotional coverage or emotional, what's what I'm looking for?
Baggage.
Emotional baggage, but no treatment. Yeah, because sometimes there's not, we don't know the name for it or who would, well, I need to call out today because I'm having symptoms of post-traumatic slave disorder. We would either be laughed at or it wouldn't be taken serious. But emotional emancipation healing circles, but this is what I want to get to, research in transgenerational epigenetics. So there's a conversation about, there's a gene within the African race that talks about this menticide. And I used to teach, and I remember these, especially the young black men, they would be so angry, they would come to me, and, oh, Miss So-and-so, I'm just going to use an example. Oh, Miss Gilbert, she's just prejudiced. And we're talking about 3rd or 4th grade. I'm like, well, where did they get that from? And the anger was so intense, and their conversation was so expanded about their anger and the recognition of different things. Not this Miss Kathy for real, but Miss Gilbert did have some racial issues toward black children. But I'm thinking, how do they know this? And so, to me, this whole epigenetics would explain that, or to automatically just be angry and not able to do so well in certain circumstances because that baggage, that unhealed trauma, we still carry that. This is all real. So, what's the answer? Totally free healthcare. And we won't even talk about the scientific racism, how our bodies have been assaulted as women. We were either impregnated and the child taken to work the field, or raped and beaten, and you had to look at your child because, every day, maybe in shame, because he looked just like Mr. So all of that scientific racism and, the story of Sarah Bartman, all of those things. Okay, next slide. So what are we talking about? This should say organizing for repair. And Black Agenda for Self-Determination, number 6, what that means is I was endorsed by the Black is Black Coalition. And so one thing that we have is called the 19 points of a political Black agenda. And so number 6 is reparations. We demand reparations consistent with international norms regarding redress for crimes against humanity. This includes enslavement, colonialism, and apartheid from which we suffer up to today. And I won't insult your intelligence by reading all of that, but all of that. H.R. 40, you can look this up. It's been introduced to the House, I think January the 3rd, 2019. HR 40, and what the 40 stands for is symbolic of the 40 acres and the mule, which we were promised a long time ago. I'm not looking for that now. I don't even know if they even still make mules. So that wouldn't do me much good. So I just, I'll take the acres, I guess, but so it's a commission to study, but it's beyond that. To study and develop reparations proposals for African Americans Act. Next slide. Okay, so this is coming to the end. So reparation means full repairs, what my button says here. Slavery and apartheid are crimes against humanity. The injuries remain. Reparations is the process of repair for crimes committed and injuries caused. Reparations must wipe out all consequences of the illegal act. Full repair is necessary to wipe out all consequences. And we talked about those 5 components. Now, I'm going to have an ask, a reparations ask. So June the 20th to the 23rd in Detroit, Michigan, there is a reparations conference, and it is a strategic conference in which our aim is to get this to be a companion bill in the Senate and to target certain senators. This is I guess you'd say a nonpartisan or whatever. Well, but no, I'm talking about the conference. It's whosoever will. And I like to represent us as Greens at the conference to develop these strategies as to how to get remaining sponsors to sponsor on so we can get this further than what it is. And so I have, let's see, I think there is, on my part, I would probably owe about $325. My lodging is already there because I lived there 2 years and have lots of friends, and they actually live where the conference is going to be. And there is a big effort to the guy in Alabama who just won.
Roy Moore?
No. Jones? Yes, Doug Jones. He needs to sign on because, as I talked about the black vote being so key, the black vote is what helped him to win. He needs to sign on, and I forgot who else they're targeting, but I would like to represent as a Green since it is part of our platform. So that's my reparations ask, and we have until June. I have gotten my one-way ticket there because I'm so determined to be a part of this and to represent us and to make what we have in our platform to be more organic and to let them know is that because the Democrats really can't really operate fully, in my opinion, with reparations because it's not in their platform, but it's in our platform. And I would like to be able to stay that and stand clear and to make this a living, organic legislation on our part. So thank you for listening. Any questions? Steve.
Have you thought about if there were some solution to reparations that would be acceptable, how it would be administered? Because I can imagine that they would say, well, we need to set up an organization like a nonprofit, and people like Oprah and Obama would administer it. I mean,
yeah.
Is that what you had in mind?
No, because with this, and like I said, then ADOS might do something like that. But with this, and some of those kinks are being worked out as far as who, but I know it definitely would not be celebrity oriented. If I can see one of those booklets on the back, it's if you look on the back there, it's Black is Back Coalition. That is a black-led socialist movement, and so they would not go for any celebrity type of shenanigans. And also in Cobra, the director of Cobra, he's also part of Black is Back Coalition and a personal friend. He's been doing this for years. And the other organization, I mean, that's not what it's about. It's totally about making what's the word I'm looking for? A movement.
You're speaking the way things get co-opted,
Right, but
taken out of your hands.
And I can't. I mean, I don't. I can't say what goes on behind, closed doors, but this is not what this is part of.
Thank you.
As far as I can see now, yes.
I had two ideas I want to throw out and see what you thought about. One was, have it ever been proposed like tax exemptions, something along those lines, and going along with like business exemption all across the board. And something else was along the lines more of when you're talking about prison or opposed to prison reform, something more along the lines of like a self-sustainable, eco-social, like not experiment, but something to be instilled into a prison system, because prison systems are, in a sense, self-sustainable in themselves, and corporations benefit off them. So having it in a way that they could, like when you put the slide on biochar, all those were like, they were experiments that were separate from everyone else. So in a sense that if there was a way to have an ecosystem set up in a prison system, that it didn't have to be privatized by someone else, that was self-sustainable, that no one benefit off of their labors but themselves.
Okay. The second thing, it sounds great. It sounds good, so I would like to hear more about it. The first one, the tax exempt, that's definitely in that HR 40 primer, tax exempt status, and as well as housing initiatives that would, because of all the scams from even long ago that Black people suffered. So that those are part of some of those initiatives in there that goes a little bit further. For lack of time, I couldn't go into all that, but that's definitely one. James.
Yeah, I'm sorry. When you mentioned the prisons and stuff, it kind of got me in a sense that there's a lot of movement and talk about restorative justice, and I'm with you about get rid of the prisons. We need something that needs to be completely eradicated, and something that's more in this whole process. There is a vein of restorative justice in every bit of it. It's complete. So I don't know how you felt about the restorative justice actions and how this intersects with that, particularly when it comes to placing the prison industrial complex with mechanisms of restorative justice, and particularly speaking with reparations, which is
right. Angela Davis has some good books. One is what prisons are obsolete prisons. I think that would call for like a study. I don't have the answer to that,
okay.
But I think we would definitely need to look at other models of other countries that have successful. What's the word? I guess the word is successful rates in criminal activities or the lack thereof, and study those. But I think the issue here that we're having is the disparities within it. The lack of justice that we have. So it's a systemic issue as well in addressing that. You're saying my time's up?
No, I'm asking a question.
Oh, okay, Kathy.
Well, I was just gonna say that primer that you passed out is available for download on the Cobra.online.org, but we're also putting it in our public folder where we'll be having
Awesome.
handouts and so forth. So everybody who has their email address on the registration form, we'll be sending a link out to you for that public folder. And you'll be able to get handouts that include whatever.
Thank you, Kathy. And then probably after June, it'll probably be updated because there's more study going to be done. And then during that week too, it'll be more stuff added to it.
Agreed. There will be more things going into that folder as we move on, including some of the videos that will be edited down and some of the backing documents that start some discussions. We got Francisco saying there.
Nikki?
Robin, in some discussions that I've gotten into with other people about reparations, and I was dissed for my support because they claim that if we're going to do this, that we have to start from the beginning. The people, the Africans who kidnapped fellow villagers and sold them to the slave traders, who sold them to the Spaniards, who then shipped them over to the islands and to America. And are we going to go after them? They're not going to support it unless we go after everybody. How do I confront them?
Well, one thing like that wasn't chattel slavery though. That was indentured servitude, and that was practiced I hear that all the time too, but it's nothing like 400 years of a crime, of humanity crime. But I mean, yes, that did take place.
Thank you.
Mine goes kind of what you're saying. I mean, first of all, with that thing, we are responsible for who we can hold accountable. There are injustices that go on all over the world that I don't necessarily go out there and spend my time fighting, because there are justices in my country that's supposed to answer to me. So Spain may have done something, somebody out in Togo may have done something, but I don't see the wealth of the slave trade in those African princes who sold in the countries where this is going on. And this goes to part of what I'm talking about, is I don't hear enough in this. I don't feel I hear enough this talk about reparations, about the idea of truth and reconciliation, which is something that I see has been practiced in Germany and in South Africa, where we are forced to take a hard look at what it was that was done and admit as a nation that we did those things, so that another movement can't come down the road and say, well, no, that's not what really happened. I think that truth and reconciliation was an important part of how South Africa was able to heal as much as they're healed. I think it was an important part of Germany with the Nazi movement and the whole things they did. And I'm disappointed that I aren't going to be talking about that as part of the reparations. That's all I have.
Okay. Austin?
Yeah, I just believe, to tag on to that it starts in like elementary school, in teaching, instilling an education, opposed to teaching some like Eurocentric point of view, getting back to what really happened, what really goes on, and what took form afterwards.
Thank you. Let's see. I think your hand was up, and then Gail, and then I think we're done. Francisco?
So my question is that in regards to the reparations conversation in the United States, by bringing the conversation of reparations, how can you think that it would also spread, that conversation would spread into other countries? Let's say, like, for example, like the relationship between like France and Haiti, and in regards to how the treatment of how France treated Haiti and stuff like that, and other countries that have suffered the same sort of fate.
Hopefully I can answer it by saying this. But one thing that I agreed to do is because I didn't know at first how to start the conversation but just to start it, and even reach out to folks that may be in other nations, even if it's social media, and develop that dialogue, even if it's just through Facebook or if it's just through YouTube. And I know I have a personal friend back home that does that. He does a lot of writing of articles. He does a lot of work between Haiti and Togo, and it's not just reparations, but a lot of other stuff. And make it a daily conversation, which is why I think these candidates now are talking about it. I don't think there's one group that can take responsibility for it, but I think it's because people are making it a conversation. Gail?
Well, I really just wanted to tag on with what Lobo said about truth and reconciliation. And I think when you tie that into an idea of restorative justice, maybe more similar to what the indigenous people in America, if you look at what some of the natives would do when, say, somebody went out and did something that damaged the community. There's other ways to deal with that and to heal not only the community and the person, besides building a prison and sticking a bunch of people in it. And I also think that, just like everything else, it comes down to we have to be honest, and our history is so dishonest. And, the stories that we're walking around with in our heads because somebody told us when we were 4 years old about something, and then we didn't stop and question it, you know what I mean? And there's so many lies of omission in what we were taught about what happened in the past. And then overemphasizing certain, the white hero character that might be a total fantasy in this situation, but it's the way the story wound up. How many really horrible situations got played off as some sort of romance, you know. So I think honesty, and I think when we're really honest, we realize there's a debt, you know, and maybe figure out how to take care of it, but you gotta get it.
All right, I'd like to thank Robin very much for that powerful presentation there.